This is the 15th Holocaust remembrance that we have had at St. Francis. It also marks almost 15 years of pilgrimages by members of the St. Francis College community to Assisi. And so we've had perhaps 50 members of our faculty and staff who have been to Assisi. We have had all of the Franciscan brothers who are with us have been to Assisi, and not because of our generosity, but because of the order's generosity. They took them quickly before we had a chance to bring the rest of them. And it also represents 50 of our students who have been to Assisi on pilgrimage. So we've been to a holy city. Assisi is a holy city. And Assisi was a sanctuary for the Jews during the Holocaust. Because of all of the towns in Italy, the one most committed to saving Jews, protecting them during the Holocaust, was the city of Assisi. And when you go to Assisi on pilgrimage, one of the sites is across the street from the place of St. Chiara, her church, is a little gift shop. And in the gift shop is the printing press that was used to forge documents that were provided to Jews who were in Assisi and passing through Assisi. In the course of this, 3 very significant figures were involved, and I will let Father Andre go into that. That's the topic of his speech. But in the course of that, one of the men responsible for saving the Jews on the ground was Monsignor Don Aldo Brunacci. And Monsignor Don Aldo ran the Casa Papa Giovanni, the house of John of John the 23rd, ran that house and welcomed the guests. And his history was quite extraordinary. He was charged with that mission. We had him here in the States about 7 or 8 years ago to receive our St. Clair Medal. He was a genuine hero. And today we're going to hear about Don Aldo and the work that he did. We're going to hear from an expert, someone who conducts the pilgrimage tours through Assisi, a Franciscan friar who I've told under no circumstances in this heat should he get into a habit. So before further ado, let me turn the microphone over to the Director of Campus Ministry for the college, a wonderful Franciscan brother who's been part of the college almost as long. One of the first things I did was decide we needed Brother Tom Grady as our campus minister, and he is responsible for many of the things that have happened in the spiritual growth and development of our students and of our college. Brother Tom.
I have the privilege of introducing our guest speaker, Father Andre, who we go back a long time. Back in the 70s, when we started to be able to translate Franciscan text, original sources, into English and then study them, Andre was part of a group that formed a Franciscan study program here in Brooklyn, housed on the next block, 135 Remsen Street, at the monastery where I live, and went on for many years. And from that came many other programs. The Franciscan Federation was formed in the United States. The pilgrimage program started and took off, and many of you pilgrims are here. All of you consider Andre your brother, as I do myself, and so you're warmly welcomed here. I want to add one more point, tying on to what Dr. Macchiarola said, which is that we housed here in 2007 the Memoria exhibit in the Callahan Center, which depicted the story that Andre's going to talk about. It's permanently housed at St. Bonaventure University, but we were the first place that it came on tour. And it was a very powerful exhibit. So Andre and I have a long history, and I'm one of his pilgrims, 2003 group, and then 2 years ago, the California Missions. Guy gets around. So we've been friends for a long time. The big difference is that I'm still on the same block. We never know where he is. I'd like to open with a prayer. Andre's biography is in Vita Studies and all that's in your program, so I'm not going to repeat any of that. But he's participated in many publications, one of which is this little office book taken from the office of St. Francis. And it's prayers to be prayed at all the hours every day. And his favorite, one of his favorites, I can tell because it's on every section, I would like to use as an opening prayer. Almighty, most holy, most high, and supreme God, all good, supreme good, totally good, you who alone are good, may we give back to you all praise, all glory, all grace, all honor, all blessing, and all good. So be it. So be it. Amen. Father Andre.
Thanks very much, Tom. Thank you, Frank. It's a real privilege to be here with you. I grew up about a mile from here. I grew up on Carroll Street and 4th Avenue. I didn't say Carroll, I said Carroll Street. They pick up my Brooklyn accent all around the world, so I haven't lost it yet. When Linda invited me to come, Deshevsky, I should say your last name, Linda, I don't know where you are, invited me to come here, I was very excited about the invitation and the offer to speak about something that has excited me from the first time I stepped foot in Assisi. To know that Assisi participated somehow during World War II, and I hope to share the somehow with you, in giving life to people, preserving life for people, for predominantly the Jewish people who came to Assisi, because before they started doing this work there were no Jews in the city at all. No Jews living there. And actually, a couple of years before Donaldo died, I had so much material that I was sharing with pilgrims in Assisi that I asked him if he wanted me to put it into a little anthology, and he said that would be nice. And so I'm going to talk from this little anthology called The Three Heroes of Assisi During World War II. And I'm going to start with the person you see already on the screen, who is a German, Bavarian. He was a medical doctor, as you can see him already in his medical clothing, his white frock. And his name is Valentin Mueller. And I want to talk about Valentin Mueller first, because without Valentin Mueller, there would have been no city of Assisi in which to welcome refugees, especially the Jewish community or the people that came there. So let me start with the first of the three heroes that Assisi remembers from this period of time. It was a hot and humid day on 31st of July, 1990, when Don Aldo Brunacci, already mentioned, the director of Casa Papa Giovanni, where we stay in Assisi, prior of the canons of the Cathedral of San Rufino in Assisi, invited me to an evening Eucharist at the Casa Chapel. After working all day with pilgrims, I was tired and I did not want to attend another Eucharist. However, I could never refuse this man. Whatever he asked me, it was what do you say, an offer you can't refuse? So when I arrived in the chapel, and it was hot like this, and they had the Italians don't like fans nor air conditioning. So it was kind of hot. But I noticed that the anziani of the city were gathered. The anziani, the senior citizens, were sitting there. And they gathered that evening on the 31st of July, 1990, to remember fondly Dr. Valentin Mueller on the anniversary of his death. They call him with great respect the savior of Assisi during World War II. This fits in well with the tribute paid to Dr. Mueller by the people of Assisi in the memorial that they erected in his honor, which you see here. This bronze memorial, when you drive into Assisi, and when most of you will come with me in the future, I hope, and we take the coach right into the city, this is the first thing you see. They put the bronze monument at the crossroads of entering the city because, again, without this man's work, the city would not have existed. So this monument there is at a pivotal point of coming into the city of Assisi. After the war, Dr. Mueller and his wife and their two children who are adults, and I think you'll see them in this slide here, and his daughter Irmgard, she became a medical doctor. His son, to the far, your far left over there, Robert Mueller became a medical doctor. And they went back to Assisi in 1950. And Irmgard, the daughter, kept a little kind of a diary of their time there. They were young children at the time. This is an older photo. And she wrote, "Daddy went on alone to Hotel Subasio. The desk clerk recognized him instantly and excitedly called the proprietors, Mr. and Mrs. Rossi. It was a wonderful welcome from a grateful people." In these words from her travel journal, Irmgard Mueller, daughter of Dr. Valentin Mueller, describes her father's return to Assisi in 1950, just 6 years after the departure of the German army, and the former medical colonel and commander of Assisi returned to the city of Francis and Clare for a visit. Ironically, the former occupier and enemy is practically given a hero's welcome just a few short years after the war. The former mayor who was in office during Mueller's time, the present communist mayor, and the bishop received him. Mueller received numerous invitations from the people in the city to come and visit. And upon his arrival, women placed flowers at the hotel entrance that formerly served as his headquarters. Now he and his family were the invited guests at the Hotel Subasio, and the city council wants to erect a monument, which you already saw, in his honor. Dr. Valentin Mueller's presence is celebrated in the streets and squares of the city. The people crowded around him, shaking his hand, embracing him. And why this adulation of a former German occupier? Well, let's the people's stories and personal experience of the commander explain why. In her travel journal, Irmgard Mueller wrote, "A woman approached us, happy and very moved, to share about the gran paura, the great fear she had during the war. But when Il Colonnello, as they called him, the colonel, moved into the city, she said the fear left her. The inhabitants of Assisi revere Mueller as its city's savior. They claim it is due to his presence that the city sanctuaries and medieval walls, treasures as well as inhabitants, remained untouched. During the war, the people used to exclaim, 'We have 3 protectors, God, St. Francis, and Colonel Mueller.'" Just as an aside for a moment, Mueller worked very hard to get Assisi declared a hospital city. In doing that, he tried to contact Berlin. Because of the stage where the war was at, Berlin never responded to him. So he began acting on his own to declare it a hospital city, which was an act of treason, according to the German military situation. Mueller was respected and loved by the citizens and as commander, he cared for St. Francis' city. He had a great rapport with Bishop Nicolini and Mayor Fortini. He frequently visited the friars. He was at Mass every morning, 7 a.m., at the tomb of St. Francis. He was Bavarian. All of Bavarian is Catholic. I don't know if you're aware of that. Any Bavarians in the room? Oh, yeah, way back there. Okay, Bill. The Bavarians are heavily Catholic, if you will, and he would have been there every day. Everyone knew that Il Colonnello would listen to them, their problems or the injustices experienced. Desperate people would telephone him at his office because everyone knew his number, which was 210. He made house calls to the people. And Mueller also stopped German soldiers from exploiting the people. And if he could not stop them, he personally worked for reparation of damages. For example, one day 2 German captains commandeered 2 taxis, pretending there was an emergency. Mueller himself followed them on his motorcycle, caught up with them near Perugia, about 25 minutes away, and he had them return the stolen cars. After many years, Francesco Pitorossi, one of the taxi owners, has never forgotten and enthusiastically tells his guests about Il Colonnello, who brought his taxi back to him. You mention Mueller to any taxi driver today, and there's only 29 taxis in Assisi. You mention Mueller to any one of them, it's like you're talking about Saint Valentin Mueller, because they revere him, okay? History in Italy is like it happened yesterday afternoon. They're not like us here. We look at history differently. For them, history was yesterday afternoon, if you will. Another time, German soldiers started to confiscate bicycles, loading them on a truck. Only Il Colonnello's order stopped them. Another night, Mueller helped a woman and her 2 children who were being taunted by drunken soldiers, his own men. And to a young wife of an Italian soldier who was in a German concentration camp, the colonel gave her the possibility of contacting him by putting a letter in his official pouch, sending it up to Germany, and an answer does come back, which, by the way, was another act of treason. He should not have done that. And the great esteem Mueller had among the people was evidenced by the announcement of the partisans near Assisi upon withdrawal. The partisans said when he was withdrawing with his men, and he kept his pistols cocked on his own men, that they wouldn't loot the city. And he was standing at the city gate doing that. And the SS were after him. And he knew this. But he kept his pistols cocked on his own men. And upon the withdrawal, the partisans of Italy said, above all things, Colonnello Mueller will not be harmed with the withdrawal. Because as they're going out the gate by the Basilica of St. Francis, the Allies were entering from the St. Clair side, the exact same time. And Mueller had his gun cocked on his own men. The memory of Colonel Mueller is important in preserving Assisi and its inhabitants. And in 1982, a commemorative monument was placed in the cloisters of the Würzburg Conventual Friary with the names of the people involved in saving the city, together with the bishop and Valentin Mueller's name. And at the same time, a delegation went from Assisi to Mueller's hometown, to Eichstätt, and they brought olive branches, which is a symbol of peace. They brought olive branches to place at Mueller's tomb. And at the base of Mueller's tomb, they had carved the Basilica of St. Francis, because it would not have existed if Mueller had not been there. Assisi was slated for the same fate of Monte Cassino. Monte Cassino was thoroughly reduced to ashes, completely reduced to ashes, and Assisi was next. Assisi was next. So by declaring it a hospital city, illegally, if you will, according to the Geneva Conventions of War at that time, the Allies could not bomb the city. They couldn't touch it. A couple of more quick points. I asked Robert Mueller, Valentin's son, did your father know that they were hiding Jews in Assisi in World War II? And Robert said to me, yes, my father knew, but my father's decision was to do nothing. He would not touch it. When Mueller died in 1951, right before he died in Munich, he was dying of cancer at age 60, they got news in Assisi, and they sent a delegation of friars up. As they walked into the hospital room in their habits in Munich, he opened his eyes, and his daughter said the words that came out of his mouth were, "My Assisi has come to me." Beautiful. And lastly, when St. Bonaventure's University, as this college as well, honored, well, no, you didn't honor Mueller, but you honored Donaldo, sorry. When St. Bonaventure's honored Mueller a few years ago, they got a little nervous, the administration. If you know Sister Margaret Carney, she was having a little bit of a breakdown, because if the press caught wind of the fact that they were honoring someone from they thought the Nazi cause, if you will, they could be in trouble. So they hired an investigator. Her name was Deborah Lipstadt. She investigated Mueller's background. I'll tell you quickly, the woman, her latest book is called The Eichmann Trial. Basically, when the award was announced there, they hired this woman to search the archives on Mueller, and she found absolutely nothing in his background which would be negative in reference to his connection with the Nazis or the SS. The SS were after him. You have it, okay? And all the stories were consistent, and this woman pronounced him clean. And she's Jewish, okay? So they hired a Jewish investigator to check out Valentin Mueller. Okay, enough on Mueller. Let me move over to my good friend Donaldo Brunacci, who was here. I begin with a little article that I wrote when I was teaching in England a couple of years ago, and I entitled the article, "Donaldo Was Right." Just barely coming to grips with Donaldo's death, he died 2 weeks before I had written this, I was reading the London Times in England, and I could feel Donaldo tapping me on the shoulder, telling me, "Read page 27. Now, he didn't do that, but I felt it. And the title of the article there was, "The KGB and the Plot to Taint the Nazi Pope, Pius XII." An excerpt from the article reads, "The KGB hatched a plot to smear the late Pope Pius XII as an anti-Semitic Hitler supporter, and fostered a controversial play that tarnished the pontiff, according to the highest-ranking Soviet bloc intelligence officer to have defected to the West, the former Lieutenant General Ian Mihai Pasipa, who broke a silence of nearly half a century to reveal that he was involved in the operation of the Kremlin, which launched a scheme in 1960 to portray Pius XII as a cold-hearted Nazi sympathizer." And I brought the whole article with me in case anybody is interested, as it appeared in the London Times. Whenever I invited Donaldo while he was alive, and he died 4 years ago, to address our pilgrims and his involvement concealing the Jewish people in Assisi during World War II, he would inevitably begin by recounting an incident that occurred at a clergy meeting in Assisi during the war. Bishop Nicolini, Giuseppe Nicolini, they were at a meeting, and the bishop called Donaldo to a side room. And the bishop opens a letter from the Vatican to read to Donaldo Brunacci, who's in his 30s. So he's still in the adventuresome time of his life. When I met him in his 70s, the adventure had finished. Okay? He was a lot more sedate at that point, but still feisty and still very, very interested in this whole dimension of Assisi's history. And Bishop Nicolini read this letter. The letter came from a bishop in the Vatican by the name of Montini. Who was Montini? Paul VI. Eventually becomes Pope Paul VI. Montini sent the letter to the Bishop of Assisi, whom Donaldo he calls Donaldo in, reads the letter, and says we are to accept, they want us to accept in this city as many refugees as we can, especially, and that's there clearly, especially the Jewish people, and to conceal them. The bishop told Donaldo, you will represent me doing this. You are to tell no one about this, not even the other priests, because Assisi, Mussolini had just fallen in Rome, and he was imprisoned, but the Germans got him out of prison. He goes to northern Italy, tries to start a new government up there. Meantime, there's a group of neo-fascists coming on the scene who were worse than the Germans, worse than the SS, the Italians, okay? So they were creating some very, very heavy problems there. Now, Donaldo said, people have asked Donaldo, we have it right in our little anthology, people have asked Donaldo, where's the letter? He said, we couldn't keep it. If we kept it and anybody found it, we'd be hauled in or arrested. So the letter was destroyed. And also, Donaldo went further to say, at the same time that that letter was read to Donaldo, the Dutch bishops up in the Netherlands issued a pastoral letter opposing Hitler and everything he was doing, especially with the Jews and the concentration camps. And right after that letter came out, the Germans rounded up 40,000 Jews up in the Netherlands and put them in concentration camps. At the same time, in Rome, Pius XII had a letter prepared that he was going to issue in the same vein. And I have a little quote in here, and I won't read it to you, but there's a quote from this Sister Pasqualina, who was, there's a book called Popessa, La Popessa. During Pius's reign, this sister was very powerful. The cardinals couldn't even get near Pius without going through her. Okay, so she really held the keys of the Vatican, if you will. And in her life story, in her autobiography, she writes that Pius came into the kitchen, which he never did. He came into the kitchen carrying papers, and he said, because this is the only place where we can light a fire, he put the papers into the fire and burnt them. It was his pastoral letter that would have said the same thing that the Dutch bishops had said. And Pius said, if they did 40,000 Jews with the Dutch bishop's letter, they're going to do 200,000 if I issue this letter. So he began to work behind the scenes. Enough for Pius XII. Just to give you a little flavor around the topic. When the refugees came to Assisi, they needed identity papers. You had to change their names. And the identity papers had to look good. It's like trying to reproduce today, I guess, a driver's license, or to try to reproduce today a social security card, but doing it well so that you can't really detect any problems. Now, since the Allies had already reached up to Rome, the people in Assisi were smart. They said, we'll create identity papers for the Jewish people on a printing press, which you see right there, which, by the way, Frank, is no longer in that shop. Yeah, it's now in the exhibition that they have going on in Assisi for Assisi during 1943. And this man, Brizzi, he would, it's not an electric printer, it's run by hand. And he would create these identity cards, but they gave the people names from southern Italy, which could not be checked in the records because the Allies had southern Italy. So if someone says, I'm from southern Italy, you couldn't check it. So you see what they were doing. They concealed it by printing these cards. Donaldo had to take these cards. Basically, they were identity cards and ration cards. Those of you with my color hair might remember, and some of you do have my color under your color. You might remember ration cards from World War II. I remember ration cards. There were different things that we couldn't get. I was right here, a mile from here during the war, okay? And these were basically ration cards. Don Aldo, he was the runner with the cards because they needed an official stamp on them from Perugia, which is the capital of Umbria. So Don Aldo would get on his bicycle the night before, but he'd cycle up to Perugia. He would stay overnight with the partisans, get the cards stamped. He had to teach class the next morning at 8 a.m. in the city of Assisi. So to get back on time, he used to hitch his bicycle up to the German convoys, and they would take him back to town with all the newly stamped identity cards. And he loved telling that story because he duped them by doing that, if you will. A few more incidents on Don Aldo. They began hiding the Jewish people in monasteries, putting some of them in a religious garb, teaching them Latin. French Jews came down that had to be taught Italian. There were some people from other countries, I remember a Polish family as well, had to be taught how to read Latin, how to read Italian. But once they got identity cards, they could put them anywhere in the city. They didn't have to be hidden because they had an identity card, although one woman flubbed it up. I told you my Brooklyn accent, you hear it. You know, I never say her, I say huh. Give it a huh, you know? They picked up on one woman, they said, your accent is Venetian. And she had to think fast. She said, oh yeah, I was a student in Venice for several years, and that's when I picked up the accent. She just picked it up that quickly, if you will. And Don Aldo said they were able to get the Jewish kids with the identity cards actually into the school system, so they didn't lose any school time at that particular time, if you will. Don Aldo was saying Mass in San Giacomo de Muro Rupto, down the street from Casa Papa Giovanni. And as he's finishing the Mass, he looks out, and there's two Jewish ladies in the back of the church. He knew them. He says, what are they doing out of hiding? I haven't set them up yet. So anyway, he finishes the Mass quickly. He goes back to the two Jewish ladies, and they announce to him that Frau Weiss, she just died, and we don't know what to do with her body. He said, leave it to me. So he went to the Comune. He bought a grave. He got her body prepared because they bury in Italy without embalming. Right away, you're buried, okay? And they took the body, and they're carrying the body to the cemetery. And Don Aldo, as they're carrying the body, they meet a German patrol. And of course, the patrol, what are you doing? Don Aldo says, well, somebody died, and I'm bringing, and her name was Weiss in German, which means white. So they changed her name to Bianca Bianco, which means white, white. You can't be any more white than that. They put it twice. Bianca, first name, Bianco, second name, okay? And they said, we're going to bury her before sunset. So the patrol saluted the coffin. They had no clue there was a Jewish woman in there, okay? And Don Aldo was tickled pink as they brought her to burial. After the war, her son came from Brazil. He came from Brazil, where he had settled, and met Don Aldo. They went and changed the whole tombstone in German now, and there was a real statement of gratitude to the people who preserved her life until her moment of death in Assisi. Are you okay so far? Yeah? Okay. Just a couple of more little things, and I'll shut up. Don Aldo lived on the Via San Francesco. They had a family apartment down there. I've been in it. A beautiful apartment, had a great view of the valley. He was returning home one evening, and he was told that there's a family from Padua waiting for you. They need to be resettled in Assisi. This man was a professor from the University of Padua, Jewish man, his Jewish wife, and two little daughters. Excuse me. So Don Aldo, as he reached his home that evening, his family home, the neo-fascists were outside waiting for him. The prefect Rocchi from Perugia, who was definitely sworn to Mussolini and Hitler, Rocchi wanted to arrest Don Aldo because they had been secretly taking photos of him in the city and knew that he was doing something stealthy, but they couldn't figure it out. So they said, they're just going to arrest him. Now, Don Aldo said, if I went back into my apartment for so much as a toothbrush, that family would be decimated. So he said, they met him in the hallway, You're arrested. We got to bring you to Perugia. He says, let's go. And they went. The family was saved. The 2 children are alive today. They just opened an exhibit in Assisi on March 24th, honoring all of the protagonists from the city during World War II. And one of the little girls, she's now in her 70s, Graziella Viterbi, came back for that opening. She lives in Rome today. And her sister, Miriam Viterbi Ben-Horin, lives in Israel. And I'm reading her little account in Italian of what she remembers at that period of time from Donaldo Brunacci, who saved their lives by not entering the apartment. And they know they're alive because of this. He was going to place them, and of course, the bishop took over at that point for the Viterbi family. This other piece I want to mention to you, a Jewish filmmaker by the name of Alexander Ramati, Italian Jew. He went to Assisi to interview Donaldo. And you're seeing pictures of this film that he produced called The Assisi Underground. Donaldo called that film un romanzo. Translated, it's a soap opera. It's not the truth. It just fabricated stories. Ramati interviewed Donaldo for hours, knowing he was the bishop's representative for working especially with the Jewish people. But to make the film a little more attractive, he doesn't want to make a diocesan priest the protagonist, so he makes a friar the protagonist, Padre Nicacci. Nicacci was an actual historical figure, but a questionable one, as I'm going to mention in a few moments. And this man was made the protagonist of the film. So the film and the book, Assisi Underground, skew the whole story of what happened with the Jewish people in World War II. The interviews that we put in here in this little anthology, and there are copies outside, I think, if anybody's interested in it, the information we put in here came out of Assisi's archives. It's not Ramati's musings on what happened during World War II. And when I watched the film, the one time I did watch it, they make Mueller look like a fool. And he was far from a fool. I forget who played Mueller, if it was James Mason. I don't remember who's up there playing the parts. Huh? Oh, Maximilian Chanel. Thank you. Thank you. I forgot that. So anyway, the true story of what happened kept coming out by Donaldo Brunacci, if you will. And let me tell you some of the other things. Donaldo, when he opened Casa Papa Giovanni, okay, the place where many of you who came with me to Assisi, we've slept there, that house was built in the 1600s. It belonged to one family. Now it holds 60 people. And we use that as our base there, if you will. And Donaldo, always a reader, he opened a bookshop for theology and spirituality. And he sat in the bookshop every day in his later years. He would just sit there reading a book, greeting people. And one day, a family came in from Israel. And they knew that somehow that was the place they should go. They went there and they met Donaldo. They didn't know who he was. And they said to Donaldo, "Can you tell us where Donaldo's grave is?" And he says, "I'm here." You're talking to him. And the family was so excited that he was alive because he had preserved them, helped save the life of their mother. Okay? And they came back from Israel to thank, they wanted just to go to the grave, did not know they were going to find him alive. He died at 92. Okay? Donaldo began to be recognized more and more as what he was, the protagonist for the Jewish people in World War II in Assisi. And that started with this place here. This college honored him, and we have all that in photos in Assisi. This college honored him a few years ago. And then other Franciscan colleges and universities began to pick up on that. Cardinal Stritch, for example, in Milwaukee. This was St. Bonaventure's award, and that award there is from Yad Vashem. And I will speak about that in a moment, if you will. St. Bonaventure's University honored Donaldo with their Gaudete Medal. The Graphic Arts Association of Philadelphia, they honored him for the false identity papers that were so well printed. So, isn't that a great honor? You got it for producing these false papers. And some of the Hebrew recognitions for Donaldo, once he came here, temples or synagogues began to engage him. So he went to Temple Emmanuel in New Jersey, the Federation of Jewish Agencies in Philadelphia, the Holocaust Museum in D.C., and then Yad Vashem. Not in that order, by the way. Yad Vashem happened in the 70s. They contacted Donaldo, and they wanted to give him the honor of, I think it's called a righteous Gentile. Am I correct on that? And they wanted to make him a righteous Gentile. And he said, thank you, but I won't accept that unless you make the bishop as well, grant the same honor to Bishop Nicolini. And the state of Israel said, well, he's dead, and we don't do it for dead people. So Donaldo said, well, then I'll bring the bishop who took his place, and you could give him the medal. And Israel agreed. So the bishop, the next bishop, went with Donaldo to Israel in the, give me a second, in the mid-1970s, and they planted the tree. In fact, in Assisi, when we put out some of the artifacts of Donaldo, he has little pieces from that tree that they put out there, if you will. They planted a tree in his memory, and they gave him the medal that you had seen up there before, recognizing him as a righteous Gentile. Steven Spielberg sent a camera crew from his studios in California who interviewed and filmed Donaldo speaking his memories for 1 week. And I think Spielberg has a kind of an archive, if you will, of these types of interviews that he's done with people throughout the world. And he has Donaldo there, if you will. The mayor of Assisi honored Donaldo. The president of Italy, they gave him, Donaldo liked wearing it. They call it, the medal is called the Cavaliere della Gran Croce. They made him a Knight of the Great Cross. But what he liked about it was they gave him a big ribbon to wear. So he would, the color of the flag of Italy, with a beautiful medal at the base of it. And he used to, he would talk to our pilgrims, I told him, put your medal on. He would put that thing over his shoulders, and he would talk to the people. But he and Spielberg were honored by Italy at the very same time. He was honored here in New York by Bloomberg, by James McGreevey when he was governor of New Jersey, and Representative Michael Ferguson of New Jersey. And it was Mike Ferguson who brought Donaldo into Congress, our Congress, to say the opening prayer of the time that he was in Washington, D.C., which we closed the book with that prayer. It's a beautiful prayer. And Donaldo was difficult for him to say anything in English, but he did well that day. And if I can conclude with some stories on the bishop, just a few. Bishop Nicolini. He was Bishop of Assisi for 45 years. Long time, from 1928 into the 70s. I forget when it ended. You can figure that out. When the Jewish people started coming, they came, a lot of them, with their books, their ritual items, stuff they would use for worship, items they would use, sacred items for worship, and all of these had to be concealed. The bishop was a bricklayer in his former life. So in the bishop's palace dates from around the 4th century. The base of the palace had always been a dungeon. So they went to the dungeon of the bishop's palace, and Donaldo would hold a little candle because they couldn't use electricity. He would use a little candle there, and the bishop started laying stone, creating a false room in which they put the Talmud and other sacred items, anything that was precious to any Hebrew person who came into the city of Assisi. They put the wall up. When somebody would leave, they had to open the wall and redo the whole thing. And Donaldo would say, oh, it was difficult wielding the pick to open up the wall, but they did it that well. This bishop, at one point, Assisi was completely full of refugees. The total number they estimate, because they would not keep records of how many people or refugees they saved, especially the Jewish number. They estimate about 250 to 300 Jews were saved in that little town from 1943 on, if you will. But the bishop went home one evening and a Jewish family was waiting in his office. And he says, there's no room in the city. He says, but I think I could sleep in my office so you can have my bedroom. The bishop gave his bedroom to the Jewish family. A great man, a great man. He's buried in the Cathedral of San Rufino. He was from Trent, actually. He's not an Assisi person. And he died up in Trent, but the Assisi people wanted him back. And they took the body and buried him in Assisi. And lastly, in this book here, this little anthology, we have a copy of some notes that the bishop wrote. And he said in one of his notes in Italian, "Diffidato Padre Rufino." I don't trust Father Rufino, the friar. Now, why did he write that? Well, when Valentin Mueller was withdrawing with his troops from Assisi, and since it was a hospital city, they left Assisi 10 million lira, which was a lot of money in those days, 10 million lira worth of medical supplies to care for people and the wounded. Somehow, Rufino got involved with that, and they don't know where the supplies went. So the bishop said, "Diffidato a Padre Rufino." I don't trust him. So there's a little, Rufino did some good things for the Jewish people, so we're not going to minimize that, but there were some issues that we found in the archives when we were doing our research. It's 12 o'clock. I think I should shut up. Unless you have any quick questions, I'll try to respond to them if I can. Yes, please. Some came from France. That I know for sure. So they did come from other areas because they came to Italy because they knew the Allies were coming up the boot. And the Allies by 43, 44 had already reached Rome. They were in Assisi by June 18, 1944, when Mueller left with his men from one gate. They entered the other gate. So yes, there were people. I know for sure the French family that came down, and there were others. But mainly Italian Jews. Italian Jews. I grew up, again, a mile from here. I grew up in that Italian ghetto that may be still remnants over there. I never knew there was such a thing as an Italian Jew until I went to Italy. And for me, that was a new learning. And also, I love going to eat in the Jewish quarter. The food is excellent. They've got a whole style of Italian food that really touches my palate very well. So I just want to say that to you, too. Mueller did not connect with Berlin and acted on his own. That was treasonous for him. That's what I've been told. That was treasonous for him to act on his own. Berlin was not responding. However, he acted in consort with Bede Hess, an American who was the leader of the conventual Franciscan friars in the city at that time. So Mueller, Bede Hess, Bishop Nicolini, and the German commander of all of Italy, Colonel Kesselring. And Kesselring gave Mueller the green light to do what he was doing, and so Mueller did it. But just a footnote, Kesselring and Mueller came from the same hometown. So Kesselring was really protecting Mueller, and he knew he was doing that. The Allies had already bombed Monte Cassino. Okay, and now I don't know if anybody's been there. I've been to the new place. It's quite insipid as a building in Italy. You know it has no antiquity to it. Although we built the same exact thing that was there before, the antiquity's gone. But all the art was destroyed in that bombing. They had taken out of there what they had to take out. And Assisi was listed next. The only way to offset that with the Geneva Convention was to get the city declared a hospital city. That was made known to the Allies. So the Allies did not bomb it. Because Berlin had never given him the green light. And so Kesselring and he went ahead with it, with all the work that was happening. And the Vatican was behind it. The Vatican was behind it. Yeah. She's verifying what I said before. They were more afraid of the Italians who were trying to hover around Mussolini called the, how do you call it, Repubblica di Salò? Repubblica di Salò. He established this new government in northern Italy, and she was living in that area at the time. They were more afraid of these Italians than they were of the SS. Thank you for sharing that.